On today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, it's a game day. We got the Maple Leafs hosting the Rangers. Tonight, we'll preview that game and tell you all you need to know to gear yourself up for it. And we had another coaching firing in the NHL today. All that and more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Dave, how you feeling on a Tuesday?
Feeling pretty good. Again, I Christmas is just coming out of nowhere, man.
Dude. It's insane. It's literally it's a week. It's less than a week now. Less than a week until Christmas, and I think I got my brother's gift. Apparently, my siblings, we've kind of figured out what we're doing for our parents, but man, I still got a lot of shopping to do.
You always tell me you're like a last minute guy.
Yeah.
And I try very hard not to be a last minute guy. And I'm looking at my list and I'm like, oh, I barely got one person done right now.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things done. And speaking of things to be done, there was something that needed to be done in Ottawa, and it happened today, Dave. The Senators officially firing DJ Smith, their head coach, after 4 seasons with the team. He'll be replaced by Jacques Martin, who's going to take over in the interim. Daniel Alfredsson also going to be put in an assistant coach's role too, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that he wanted to get behind the bench, but here we are. He's going to. I think it's probably good just to have a guy who's, so respected in that locker room, I would imagine, and as a guy who used to play and was the captain there, for him to kind of maybe be a liaison between the coaching staff and the players. Probably good just to have that veteran leadership down there.
Yeah, I mean, Alfredsson was in a player development role when they brought in Steos, and that was a big thing for the Senators to get Alfredsson even back into the fold after him and Melnick had that falling out.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of discussed when Jacques Martin was brought in the first place, what exactly was the plan here? Is this the guy, who is he? What was kind of his role? And we already knew DJ Smith had a time, it was a matter of time before a move was made. It felt like that. Funny enough, he was the longest serving Canadian NHL head coach before he got fired. Now it's Shelton Keefe.
Yeah.
But I see the news and I wasn't surprised. It was one of those you see some of these moves made, like the Berube, Dean Avison, those guys getting fired. A little bit of surprise. You didn't expect that to happen. DJ Smith, it kind of just felt like I got to hear from all those guys from Ottawa shouting finally.
Yeah, that's legit. Yeah, it did feel like it. It was almost like Bruce Boudreau last year in Vancouver, where it was when. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, and it was when is this going to happen? It's getting real awkward, and then you're talking about it's leaking out onto the ice, they got dummied by the Vegas Golden Knights, and I mean that's a really good team, obviously, they're just a tough team to beat, but it didn't look like the effort was there. I saw the highlights, I saw some of the goals, and I'm just oof, that's tough, man. Not to say that the guys weren't trying, but it does seem like they just, that team, before they get into a real dark rut, they may just need a different voice. And that's what Jacques Martin's going to bring them. But the guy's 71 years old. I'm just I don't know what the plan is going to be with Jacques Martin. Did you happen to catch any of the press conference? I missed it, but was there a? Did he say anything? Steve Stais say anything when it came to what the plan is for Jacques Martin and if it's his interim role for the rest of the season?
I think like the big one here is like the organization just needed like consistency, right?
Mm,
I think that consistency obviously comes from all the way top to bottom. Like the weirdest part about this whole thing, the guy was DJ Smith ran practice today, full practice, then was fired. Like imagine, like imagine you go through you're like people kind of already made the decision you're getting fired, but they allow you to work, do some work,
yeah,
fire you.
it's like yeah, like at the end of the shift, you get let go. Right at the end of the shift, it's like, why would you tell me now? Although I'm pretty sure, like I heard Dean Evison sharing a story on one of the podcasts out there with one of the players. It was I can't remember which one it was. I don't want to misinterpret it, but he basically said something similar. Like he went through a practice and then they had a different practice. I guess he said where they set up like a ping pong table or something, and they're trying to get guys a little loose. And then he went home to take a nap, and he said he got a phone call to come back to the rink, and they fired him on the spot. Unfortunately, so at least DJ Smith didn't get back to the rink yet, or get back home yet, and had to go back to the rink, I suppose. But again, we all knew this was coming. I'm sure DJ knew this was coming, man. Like this was so similar to the Woodcroft situation where it's like the team just almost has to make a move. And you saw what happened when Edmonton fired their coach. You talked about Dean Evison. They fired their coach. And last week, Craig Berube got let go by St. Louis and they went off and they won, their first handful of games since moving on and bringing in a new coach. So the new coach bump is what the Sens are hoping to get with this move by, ousting DJ Smith, bringing in Jacques Martin. They're 11-5 as it sits right now. And Dave, they're 12 points out of a playoff spot right now, out of that second spot in the Eastern Conference and the wild card spot. But they do have games in hand, I suppose, on most of these teams. So they've only played 26 games, whereas you look at Detroit, they've played 31. Washington's played 28, but Carolina's played 31. The Islanders have played 30. You look at Florida, they've played 30. Like they've got games in hand to make up a little bit of ground, but currently last place in the Eastern Conference in terms of points. Their points percentage is second last. Do you think that this coaching change came soon enough, or do you think it was a little too late and there's no hope in hell in this team clawing back into a playoff push?
I wouldn't say it was too late. I would have liked to have seen it earlier, considering like this isn't just like they're on a 4-game losing streak right now. It's not like this is the first losing streak, and this isn't the first time people were calling. They're literally like, I think it was like a month ago, people were calling for DJ Smith to be fired. Like,
Yeah.
not much. It got worse. Like, it got a little better than it got worse. Right. And so I thought then would have been the time to do it. You literally brought in Jacques Martin to be the advisor, and then not even like a couple weeks later, he's taken over the job.
Oh,
Like
yeah, like literally this is what 2 weeks later, maybe
about
2 weeks later, and all of a sudden he goes from being the advisor to actually he's going to take over behind the bench. He's no longer the middleman. He's not going to be the guy because we don't want DJ there anymore running the show. We can't say we didn't expect it. Like a
no.
lot of us kind of talked about that being the case. Like, oh, is this a coach in waiting type of situation where they're just waiting, maybe getting Jacques Martin up to speed, getting to know the players, and then all of a sudden, at the second something goes really south, they're gonna make the move, and they made it today.
Yeah, and like when you ask about whether this team can get even back into the playoff race, like it's hard. It's gonna be a tough climb here because it's not just making up those 12 points, it's other teams falling off cliff. Maybe a team like Detroit that, you know, was maybe playing a little bit better than people were expecting. They're now, first off, they're on one healthy goaltender left. They're They've struggled since they signed Patrick Kane. So, like, it's more of those teams allowing an opening for Ottawa to get in. I just don't know if there's going to be enough for Ottawa.
Well, that and you look at the teams that they have to leapfrog, like Jersey. Jersey's going to be a tough team to leapfrog. You've got Tampa's going to be a tough team to leapfrog, and I mean, we'll see what we get out of Pittsburgh. They did get a win over Minnesota, so they picked up a win there. But they're clearly going to try and be competitive. But so that'll be another team that'll be tough to leapfrog. So yeah, lots of teams there who are going to be competitive on the stretch and will be competing for wins and points with the Ottawa Senators. Did they dig themselves too far of a ditch to climb out of? I mean, that's been the literal story for this team since DJ Smith took over. Every single year, terrible starts. Then they get it going after Christmas, but run out of time. And maybe this is their way of, I don't know, changing things up, and maybe there's a chance. We did see the St. Louis Blues do something pretty special a couple of years back. I don't see this Ottawa team winning a Stanley Cup, but it's the end of the road for DJ Smith in Ottawa, a former Mike Babcock disciple. DJ Smith was the assistant here in Toronto during Babcock's time. And speaking of Toronto, you mentioned it earlier how with this firing, Keefe now becomes the longest tenured head coach among all the Canadian teams. Isn't that wild? He's only been here for like 4 years.
It just shows like there aren't many teams in the NHL that have kept their coaches for a really long time. Like, I think John Cooper is the longest serving NHL coach right now. Mike, you can maybe point to Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh.
We'll see how long that is, Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. But yeah,
like, you look at the how many teams have changed coaches. It's a tough job,
dude. We've already had 4 this season, which is crazy to say. That there's technically 5 if you want to include Babcock. Actually, technically 5 coaching, and we're not. It's not even Christmas yet. But I mean, and it's working. So I'm guessing that's influencing these decisions, right? Like you're seeing that new coach bump come in and come to fruition, and they're starting to win some games. The Oilers, won a bunch of games since they made the coaching change, and they got themselves back into a playoff race. The Minnesota Wild have won a bunch of games. They're like 7-3 or 6, like 7-3 or 6-3 since they made their coaching change. And you've got the Minnesota or the St. Louis Blues who've won 2 or 3 games since moving on from Craig Berube. So we'll see if Jacques Martin can have the same effect with the Ottawa Senators. They're going to be in Arizona tonight, so they got a game in Arizona. How about that parallel? Can you remember a head coach that was fired after Vegas, losing to Vegas, and then next up made their debut in Arizona? Think of another one.
Maybe the Ottawa Senators just really want to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe that's what's going on right now.
I don't know.
I remember. I do remember that. Like, I still remember vividly everything they want, because Shanahan, I think he had to fly in, or like he came in out of nowhere to make that decision. It wasn't Dubas that announced it and took the questions. It was Brendan Shanahan that did it all too.
Yeah. So that's the latest news in the NHL from Monday. DJ Smith out as the head coach of the Ottawa Senators. I'd imagine, I don't think it's the Leafs and Sens don't play for a while. I don't think at this point, because they just played a couple of games here. Sorry, I lied. They played, I think, the first game after the Christmas break. So December 27th, the Sens are in Toronto. And that'll be the first game that, Toronto will get to see Jacques Martin behind the bench as the coach. So maybe there'll be changes by then, and perhaps a new coach bump will stick around until then. But for Toronto's sake, hopefully not. Speaking of the Maple Leafs, we don't got to talk about a game on the 27th because there's a game tonight. They got the Rangers in town. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll tee up the game, tell you our 3 keys to victory as well. But first, I want to tell you about one of today's show sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The all-in prices show your total up front, so you're never getting hit with those hidden fees and know you're getting a great deal. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save on money. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Could make for a perfect holiday gift for a friend or a loved one. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off tickets. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. This is a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast. You can find our show wherever you find your podcast at. You can also find the video form up on YouTube. We've got new content coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. We got a game tonight. The New York Rangers seeking revenge after getting embarrassed on home ice just a week ago. So real quick, kind of home and home within the same week between the Leafs and Rangers. What type of game are you expecting tonight, Dave?
I mean, the Rangers could not have had a worse first period when they played the Leafs last time. I'm expecting more of the Rangers from like that second period. And I'm very curious to see who the Rangers will start in this game too, because we saw Shesterkin, but we know that Jonathan Quick has been the better goaltender of the two lately. I mean, all season, for most of the season.
Yeah, honestly, it's true. So they could go with Quick, but like you would think Shesterkin being a competitor, a battler, he's going to want the net. He's probably going to demand it, and he's an all-world goaltender. I know he might be struggling this year, but I think he has the respect of, his team, the organization, his coaches, that if he wants to get that revenge game basically, and he wants to win tonight and beat the Leafs, I'm sure he probably could make that type of demand. But yeah, I guess we'll see who ends up getting the start. As for Toronto,
he did beat the Boston Bruins in overtime. So
he did. No, I mean, Shesterkin, that giving up 6 the other night was not Shesterkin-esque. We know this. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was like the first time that Matthews had ever scored on Shesterkin. Like the guy he was unbelievable. So we'll see who ends up getting the start for the Rangers. As for the Maple Leafs, I don't believe it was announced who the starter is going to be. However, it should be Martin Jones, right?
Yes, it should be, because you go with the goaltender that gives you the best chance to win. In the last week, you can make the case, arguably, Martin Jones has been the better goaltender between him and Ilya Samsonov. And he beat the Rangers.
I do not think it's arguable.
Some people still have this feeling of what Martin Jones was versus what he is right now. Right now, he is actually pretty, like, I gave him a star in that game against the Penguins. He wasn't really talked about a lot in that game because of everything that went on. Like, everyone was talking about the offense and and how good they were.
I understand that, but the way you said it was funny. You're like, I actually gave him a star. Got a 38 save shutout. It's you deserve the star.
Because how many people were talking about the fact that the guy got a 38 save shutout after that game?
No, I mean, you're right. But it's actually wild to think about how he didn't get enough credit for that win because look, it's not like it was an easy shutout. Like last week when Sammy got his shutout in Nashville, that was an easy peasy shutout. That was like 18 saves. Like he didn't face a lot of rubber. 38 shots against Pittsburgh, a pretty good team. Like that was a good performance from Martin Jones.
Yeah, and
And he should get
arguably,
another one tonight against the Rangers, who he beat last week.
yeah, like he's looked steady. It's you see it's not even just like the numbers he's putting up. It's also how I watch these guys in the net, their body language. Like watching that Columbus, for some reason I decided to rewatch that Columbus game. It appeared on my YouTube algorithm. Shame on YouTube for that one. And like seeing Ilya Samsonov's reaction after letting in some of the goals, you're just like, I don't know how you can really trust this guy against these tougher teams like the Rangers.
Yeah, he's got a confidence issue right now, but there's a conversation to be had about, how can a goaltender work through his confidence issues? Can he do that in practice? Can he do that by taking a couple of nights off, or does he have to work through it in game action? And if you still believe that Samsonov has to be part of this team's solution this season, you kind of do need to give him an opportunity to work out of his funk. But at the same time, it's like, well, if he doesn't, you don't want to waste that time. And there's a possibility that Martin Jones could fill the void just as good as Samsonov. Like Sam's on a 1-year deal. He's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. It's not like he's your goalie of the future. Could he be? I suppose. Like he's still young enough where I guess he could be. But I don't know if this is a goaltender who's this inconsistent that the Maple Leafs want to marry themselves long term. I mean, I think they've got it. They like Joseph Woll. I like Joseph Woll. I think eventually he becomes your guy. But like if you're looking at Martin Jones, it's not inconceivable that he could win a number 2 job at this point. I'm not there yet. Obviously, I'm not there yet. It's only been a couple of games, but look, if Sammy is going to be this wildly inconsistent, I don't know how much trust he'll have from the coaching staff and from the players in front of him too.
That's it right there. To be a starting goaltender, you need the rest of the team to feel confident that you're going to get the job done each and every night. I haven't had that confidence in Samsonov this year. You know, the whole talk about the Leafs were giving up so many goals at home, right? How many goals they were allowing home? Have they been playing great defensively? No. But the other thing is Samsonov hadn't been playing well, right? Like those are things that come together. If you're not confident with the goaltender behind you, you're going to play differently defensively. You're going to be second guessing what you're doing defensively as well. And it's visible when you see other goaltenders come in, and the Leafs have had better outings, right? Martin Jones comes in. He's looked pretty solid. Joseph Woll, yeah, there were a few games here and there he did not look very good, but lately we were ready to almost anoint him as the starter because
and let's also not act like he hadn't had to play a lot of hard games. How many times did we come out and say, "Oh, this game should have been 3-0 after one"? Joseph Woll kept them in it long enough until the offense showed up. So it's not as though like Joseph Woll, like the team's playing well in front of Joseph Woll and then not playing well in front of Samsonov. They've both faced games where they've had a siege of shots. One guy was stopping him, Joseph Woll, and the other guy was not, Ilya Samsonov. That's, to be completely honest and simple about it, that's the way it's been. I didn't mean for this to turn into like a bash Sammy conversation. I just wanted to talk about who should start in goal, but ultimately it comes down to one thing. I think Martin Jones is the best option tonight, and that says something to me. That doesn't that say something to you that those words are coming out of our mouths and it makes sense?
It does. And when Martin Jones was signed, again, it was one of those moves where there was like curiosity behind it, but you understand why it happened. Like you can't go into an NHL season now thinking you're okay with just 2 guys in net. You need 3. Vegas used 5 last year. Injuries play a factor.
Yeah.
That's the other. But like that's the other thing you have to account for too, because the Leafs had injuries last year. They almost didn't have an NHL goaltender that they could call up. They had to find a way to get a guy onto the damn roster, and they had to get rid of another contract to do it. So like those are things that's the one thing Brad Treliving made a priority. He had to get Martin Jones in here, got him on that. He did that little deal with the waivers so that team would have to pay that $100,000. Like those are things that a GM saw, forthright, and it's paid off for the Leafs. And now we're talking about Martin Jones, not as like a maybe a third goaltender. This guy has a good chance to be a backup for this team.
Could be. Like, he's played over 400 games in the league. There's no reason why he can't be a number two, and a good mentor too, who's got a lot of experience in the National Hockey League, both as a starter and as a backup. So, he works, man. He works, and he can be like the guy spent a long career being a 1B. So if he works out, I think that's good for Toronto, because that also would free up an opportunity to move on from that salary of Samsonov as well. Should note that, though, there is an interesting situation with Martin Jones, just to keep in mind, where the second he's on the roster for 30 days, he will require waivers again. So you can no longer send them back and forth through the waiver wire. Once you are on the NHL roster for 30 days, you do require waivers again. And if you look at all the injuries that are going on in the NHL right now, there's no chance in hell that this guy clears and makes it through. No chance whatsoever. So especially with that bonus already being paid out now too. Now there's really no deterrent from bringing this guy in. So the Leafs will have a decision to make when Joseph Woll is healthy. Either carry three goalies, risk losing this guy to waivers, or I don't know. There's a third option that could be on the table, but Martin Jones will have to continue to play well for that option to be legitimate at this point. Still a little too early, we will say that, but if things continue the way that they have over the course of last week, maybe that's something that does end up happening. All right, let's take one more break. We'll come back and we'll continue to tee up tonight's game, Leafs versus Rangers. We'll take a look at the rosters and the lineups, and then our three keys for victory for the Leafs tonight as well. So we'll do all that when we return. You're listening to Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NHL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you would think about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NHL season. FanDuel, official partner of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are teeing up tonight's Leafs Rangers game down at Scotiabank Arena. We are hoping that Marty Jones gets the start. We're not sure what the goaltending duel is going to look like tonight, as it could be either guy on either side. That said, why don't we take a look at the lineup that the Maple Leafs will be putting out there tonight, because it's going to look different than it did on Saturday. Although, Saturday looked pretty good. I do got to say, like, Marner and Domi looked great together. But it appears that the lines went back to the way they were in practice today, with Matthews returning from his illness to center that top line with Nylander and Nyes, Bertuzzi, Tavares, and Marner. Robertson, Domi, and Yarncroc as the third line, and then McMahon, Camp, and Noah Gregor as the fourth line. Defensively, Lagesson and Timmins as the third pair. McCabe and Timothy Liljegren comes back, and he'll be the second pair right side defenseman. So it looks like McCabe goes back to the left side. And then Benoit technically was at practice today as Morgan Riley's D partner. The expectation is that TJ Brody should be good to go for the game tonight. And he'll obviously join Morgan Riley on that pair. If not, we'll probably just see the same pairings that we saw in the game against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this flu bug or illness, whatever TJ Brody's had, it's pretty bad. Like Sheldon Keefe said that his first meal was at practice on Monday on Monday.
Yeah.
That's pretty brutal. So yeah, I thought maybe, I don't know if maybe just because obviously Brody being out, it just made more sense to have Liljegren there on the right side. I am curious in seeing how McCabe and Liljegren do play together now that they're reunited. I know that they had their ups and downs when the year started, but yeah, now the Leafs have options, which is not something we thought we were going to be saying a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think one of the more underrated storylines over the last few weeks is how big of a bounce back that Jake McCabe has had. He's honestly been real solid. Like, if you look at the last 15 games, which coincides when he returned to this team, they have one loss in regulation, and he's played big minutes for them. He's killed a lot of penalties. He's dishing out some big hits. He's blocking shots, and he's defending pretty well as himself as well. He's rebounded extremely well considering how the season started out, and I don't think there's enough people talking about it.
Well, and like you have to think about the injury that he had too. He's been banged up this season. A lot of the guys on the Leafs blue line have been banged up this season, including Liljegren. I just think the confidence in him, he's understood his role. He knows what he needs to do to be successful. He just goes out and he does it. And, usually they say when you're not talking about a defenseman, it's a good thing. But so I guess that's a good thing for McCabe that even though when he's doing well, no one's talking about it. But yeah, no, we're starting to see the little things that made him such a coveted defenseman when the Leafs got him, why he was such a coveted target. Even like the offense too, right? That goal he scored. Those are the things that you want to see from him. The hits are the big one too. The physicality. We talk about this Leafs blue line not being as physical. Say, well, yeah, McCabe wasn't here, so you lose some of that. He's picking it up now. I think the confidence is there, and now that I think maybe he's a little more sure of himself health wise. Now he's able to be a little more free in how he wants to play his game.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they need out of this guy who's, brought in to be a shot suppressing defenseman who, they need to be kind of a shutdown guy. So hopefully that, play continues and he, won't be a liability anymore. His goals against per 60 in his last 10 games is just 1.6. Whereas the first few games prior to his injury, it was like up in the threes, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 goals per 60 minutes of play. So that's been cut down drastically. So that's obviously a really good sign as well. And in terms of, how many chances he's giving up, just 12 high danger chances per 60, where again, prior to the injury, I believe that number was closer to like the 19 range when he got hurt. So giving up 7 less high danger chances per 60 minutes of play per game, basically at 5-on-5, definitely is going to help your team keep pucks out of the back of the net. So another quick little shout out to Jake McCabe. That being said, let's take a quick peek at the Rangers lineup for tonight that the Maple Leafs will be defending against, that they'll be playing against. And again, not too sure who's going to be in net for the game, but we do have an idea of who's going to be playing up front. So Chris Kreider with Mika Zibanejad and Blake Wheeler up on that top line. You've got Temi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, and Alexi Lafreniere as the second line. You've got Will Cooley, Nick Bonino, and Johnny Brodzinski as the third line. Tyler Pitlick, Barclay Goodrow, and Jimmy VC will be making up the fourth line. The defensive pairings tonight got Ryan Lindgren and Adam Fox, Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba, and then Braden Schneider and Eric, the Leaf Killer, Gustafson. I was a Leaf Killer, I suppose, but former Maple Leaf who'll probably make the Leafs pay tonight because that's typically how things work.
Yeah. Eric Gustafson has been a shrewd signing by the Rangers this offseason.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, I'm in a really deep fantasy league, like 16 teams with like minor leagues and full rosters and all the nine. And he was actually like a decent waiver pickup for me early on in the season. Put up some points for my squad. He's dropped off a little bit. I've since dropped him, but earlier in the year, yeah, he was doing his thing with the New York Rangers. Really quickly, Dave, 3 keys to victory for the Leafs tonight.
Get off to a good start. That's what allowed them to beat the Rangers last time. Get off to a good start. I think keep the energy on offense. They were really aggressive. They were really pushing the pace, pushing the tempo on offense. I think that's important against a Rangers team that's got some bigger bodies. Right, they're gonna want to plug the middle of the ice and keep the chance to the outside. You got to find ways to get yourself through there and make most of the power play opportunities. They did a good job against the Penguins of getting a few power play goals. The penalty kill was actually really solid against Pittsburgh, although it's not too tough these days to be good against that Pittsburgh power play. The special teams are going to be important against the Rangers for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they can play with some speed too. That'll definitely help, especially kind of through the neutral zone there. That's really where I thought they were dangerous on Saturday. Also, was playing with speed and playing good transition game. So I think that's going to be key tonight as well against a veteran lineup in the New York Rangers. All right, pal. You got anything else you want to mention today before we sign off?
No, I'm looking forward to this game. I like when obviously Leafs go up against the top team. I want to see this Leafs team put together a string of consistent games together and some consecutive wins. They're right in the thick of it in the Atlantic. I want to see them really challenge the Bruins for top spot.
Yeah, hey, they're not far off, man. Not far off. 5 points out of a playoff spot with a couple games in hand? Not too far off from the big bad Bruins. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like and a comment on YouTube if you've enjoyed the program. And we'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to recap the game against the Rangers. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.